Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Unlocked, where we talk about unlocking the potential of you, the people you work with, and the people you do life with. At the time of this recording, I'm offering all of you, yes, my lovely listeners, a free 15-minute communication coaching call. You come with some kind of communication problem, and I give you a solution. My calendar link is in the show notes, so check that out. Those of you that know Shed know that you're in for a treat. Those of you who don't know Shed, I'm just going to tell you, you're in for a treat. He has so much to bring. If you're familiar with Simon Sinek and his work, Shed has been working along Simon for a number of years in various capacities, helping build that organization and doing the things that he's done there. And you're going to hear, Shed's own thoughts and ideas around leadership and what speak up culture really means. And it's so good. His new book, Speak Up Culture, is out, and it's got all the good stuff in it. And we're going to talk about a few of those things in this interview. Stephen Shedletzky, full name, or Shed as he generally goes by, helps leaders make it safe and worth it for people to speak up. He supports humble leaders, those who know they are part of both the problem they experience and the solutions they can create, as they put their people and purpose first. A sought-after speaker, coach, and advisor, he's led hundreds of keynote presentations, workshops, leadership development programs. He's a thought leader on psychological safety and workplace and creating speak-up cultures where people and organizations thrive. He works with leaders around the world and serves clients in all industries. He graduated from the Ivy Business School and received his coaching certification from Coactive Training Institute. He lives in Toronto with his wife and 2 kids. You're going to get so much stuff out of this. If you have a pen and a paper nearby, you're going to want to write down some of the quotes and the things that he says in here, because he drops them, and it's awesome. So here we go. Without further ado. Shed, it's awesome having you, man. I've been following you for a while, and now I get to talk to you for real.
Nice. Well, we're not in person. This is, there's like one more level of for realness.
I'm gonna get there one day, Shed. One day we're gonna meet in person. And
Toronto to Atlanta. It's not that far.
It's not that far. And actually, I've been to Toronto one time. You have this cool little art district down there, and I stayed in this cool little hotel that had like different room themes and all this stuff. You know what I'm talking about?
I don't, but I know the art district. I don't typically stay in hotels in my own town.
You don't stay in hotels in your own town? Oh, well.
Not as often as I'd like.
If you do, you should probably stay in that hotel. It's pretty funky. I stayed in like some galactic cowboy room.
Cool.
Like, I don't know. It was kind of crazy. But
nice.
Yeah, man, it's really good talking to you. And I hope that other people are as inspired as I am when I hear you. So, no pressure.
Thank you very much.
Tell me about what's going on in your world right now. What is the thing that you're hitting on the most, that you're talking about the most to your clients?
Oh, interesting. I think a couple of big themes. One is a culture of nice is not a culture of kind. There's sort of this, when I talk about speak up culture and psychological safety, one of the automatic places that folks go to is, oh, everyone agrees and gets along all the time. And that's not the case. In fact, when you have a true speak up culture and psychological safety, the true test is how well are your debates and disagreements, and how well do you hold tension and navigate through it, so long as you're still displaying tact, decency, respect, all those good things. And then the other that I'm enjoying talking about quite a bit, which I think is really apropos, is how do we both disagree with folks and respect them at the same time? I think that's really key. And I make up a story that's the best way for us to make progress, individually, teams, even as a society.
So to disagree, but yet I still respect you, kind of thing. So is that more on the sender or the receiver?
Yes.
Okay.
I mean, I think it'll often show up from someone will share something and you're like, I don't agree with that, or they're wrong, or they're an idiot, or they're an awful person. And that's like the instinctual place that we go to. And I'm inviting that we actually go to a little bit more curiosity, and that if we ask some questions, things like tell me more, or what got you to believe that, or what's behind that for you, we can actually learn a little bit more and potentially connect with someone. um yeah yeah, I think there's a lot that we can do there to dig deeper, to try to do the work to figure out how is someone justified to hold the view that they hold.
Let me ask you this, because I often think about that too, and the curiosity thing. I preach those words as well, from critique to curiosity. How can we be more curious? How can you ask more questions? Um, when does it create a culture of defensiveness? I know that that's probably more on the receiver side to understand, how are they interpreting the words that are coming at them? What do they have a tendency to get defensive, et cetera, et cetera. But when I come to you, maybe I don't disagree with maybe I disagree with what you said, but I still want to respect you. But I'm like, okay, so tell me, why do you believe that thing, or what about this particular idea why are you going with that? And I'm causing you to defend your case to me, right? And in a
Yeah.
way, and how do we not make sure that we're not creating this, like, I'm always defending myself? Why do I always have to defend myself against you?
Um, Interesting. So I think a couple things. One is, as you might know, I worked with Simon Sinek and continue to still do work with his team for many years. And the irony in we say start with why, but one of the greatest ways to help get to why is not by asking why based questions, because why based questions are inherently judgmental, right? I could say, why do you feel that way? And even if my tone of voice isn't judgmental, it's really hard not to be judgmental when you ask a question that starts with why. But if I ask a question that starts with what, like what led you to believe that, or what got you to that conclusion, help me see what you see. So we can ask curious questions, but how can we do a little bit more work to ask them in ways to say, hey, I'm not yet joining you where you're joining you, where you are. I really want to. How can you help me get there? Like, take me through the assumptions, the research, the points of view that you have, the experience, the case studies. Help me join you where you are. Um, and if someone gets, you can only control what you're putting out, tone of voice, words, intent, all of that. If it's received in a defensive or a shutdown way, you can't own that 100%. um you can take ownership over the impact you may have had to a degree. uh but if I'm working really hard, Scott, to be like, I don't yet see what you see, and I really want to help me get there, and if the response is you're a jerk, I'm like, okay,
Yeah.
that's not going to work. um yeah, which is another thing that I've been having fun with is, um speak up culture is not licensed to be an a-hole. So we say, bring your whole authentic self to work. It's like, yeah, I like that sentiment. But if your whole authentic self is jerk, you still got to own it, right? It's not an excuse to use a speak up culture as a weapon. I'm just being honest. You still got to own your impact on others, even if it's unintended.
Yeah, I talk a lot about people having permission to be who they were designed to be. Like, I think that we all have, there's an injustice in the world where we feel like these expectations, or we feel like I have to fit in this box of what you think I need to be in, or this role, whatever this role calls for me to be. I need to do that thing, when it's not ultimate freedom of being that thing I deserve, I'm designed to be. But again, the accidental behavior of just going through and just, guns ablazing, shooting off whatever I want to, can cause a lot of damage at the same time. So own it. You got to own it and be respectful of the audience that you're speaking to. So
Yeah, totally.
um speak up culture.
Yes.
Here it is. I got my copy. And I blazed through this thing, man, because it was chock so with so much good stuff in it. I want to, though, spoil it for everybody. Okay.
Let's
We're gonna
do it.
spoil it, and we're gonna go straight to the it's personal chapter, because I
Cool.
want to set the stage for why you feel such a personal responsibility and a personal drive to talk about a speak up culture.
Well, so I'm a big believer that everyone's leadership journey ought to be personal. There has to be something that you've experienced in your life, which could be a triumph and something high and wonderful, or it could be a tragedy or something hard. But we've all been through things that give our lives greater meaning. And for me, there's sort of a couple significant experiences in my life that caused me to write this book. One, I grew up with a stutter. I still do have a stutter. I've learned how to work with it. I married a speech therapist. Good choice. Um, but I know intimately, like I was terrified of public speaking. And by public speaking, I mean in front of any other person other than just me. I was typically terrified to speak up in class in small groups of friends, and I that fear was uh, like really present into my early 20s. And then I sort of flung myself into leadership roles where I had no other choice, but I had to speak in front of people. And then I took a course in business school with an amazing professor, a guy by the name of Dennis Shackle. And we had, it was a double class. So it was like 3 hours of class on presentation skills, on advanced presentation skills. And I was getting decent at it. And he prompted the class with an exercise after our first 3 hours of class. The end of it, he showed MLK, Dr. King's I Have a Dream speech. And he said, now that is passion. Show up next class speaking with as much passion as Dr. King, which is like no small request, right? And I'm Canadian and I went to a Canadian school. So there were people who spoke of their love of their favorite hockey team or curling. There was one person who spoke about mint chocolate chip ice cream. I sat in that class and I knew the only thing that I could speak about, like it hit me a deer in the headlights, was talking about overcoming my fear of public speaking. And I this next class next week, I shared a 5 minute talk on not being able to say the word très in French class in grade 6, which was like the bottom of the bottom for me in terms of speaking up. Um, and I went to a stutter camp from a great organization called the Speech and Stuttering Institute, and I worked on it and I got tools. And giving that talk was liberating. So there's that experience. And then there's the other experience of in my near 20-year career, I've seen all sorts of teams. I've seen teams that legitimately have a speak up culture, and it's fabulous. I've seen teams that don't have a speak up culture, but don't pretend that they have one. That's better than this middle one that I've also seen and experienced, where we say there's a speak up culture until you test it just right. And as it turns out, it's very selective on what is actually what's safe and worth it to talk about and what isn't.
How do you test it?
A few ways. I mean, one is reputation. So you can ask around how do thing go, like how do you challenge authority here? And if the answer is D, none of the above, right? Probably not a great sign. And these are things that you can do even as you're interviewing. You can interview the folks who work there. You know, how often are folks sharing new ideas? How often do you share feedback with one another to help each other grow? Do you talk about concerns before they become problems? How do you disagree? How do you debate? Do people admit mistakes? These are all ways to sort of test it. And then taking modest, reasonable tests, saying the thing and seeing how it goes. And you don't have to start necessarily with the biggest thing, but you can start with something and build relationship and build empathy, and then keep testing and expanding those waters.
I like this. I love visual tools. I use a lot of visual tools in my work with teams and leaders. And there's this one. If people can see it in the video, but they probably can't see it on audio. But it's
We can share a link. Yeah.
yes, we can. There's this quadrant, right? Is it
Yeah.
safe and is it worth it?
Uh-huh.
Can you walk through this thing for me for all the audio people that can't see it? Help them visualize this tool.
Yes. So Kim Scott, who endorsed the book, has an unwritten rule that every business book has to have a 2 by 2 matrix.
Every single
So
one. Yes.
every single one, yes, yes. So I
Or a Venn
literally took
diagram.
a,
Do you have a Venn?
yeah,
You don't have a Venn
you got,
diagram in here, but yeah, you do.
no, not quite, but we kind of sort of do with the culture gears, but in terms of culture changes across mindset, actions, and systems. I digress. Um, so yeah, so I took a 2 hour drive north of the city here in Toronto and came up with my 2x2. And we've actually made an edit to it, Scott, because it goes, so is it safe and is it worth it? Right? This is the matrix. And these are the two questions that we either consciously or subconsciously ask ourselves before we speak up. Inside of a healthy speak up culture, folks feel that it's both safe and worth it. I will emphasize feeling though, because you and I could report into the same leader. You could say they're the best leader you've ever worked for in your entire life. And I could say, do we work for the same leader? I think they're awful. And we're both right because it's our perception. But if the vast majority of folks, especially on a diverse team, feel that it's safe and worth it to speak up, chances are you're doing a lot of things right. Um, the other quadrant, so uh, yes, psychological safety, yes, a strong perception of impact. Is it safe? Is it worth it to speak up? In the lower left, though, you have an unhappy marriage of apathy and futility and danger. In the book, we put fear, but as I began to think about it more and more, it's not fear because it can both feel psychologically safe and worth it, and fear is still present. That's why I harp against the term fearless leader. That is not our goal. It should be the leader who feels the fear, uses it as data to figure out how best to pursue. Like fear is data, fear is biological. And so, yeah, in speak up cultures, it both feels safe and worth it to speak up. The opposite is it feels both psychologically dangerous and apathetic or futile. There's no point in speaking up. It's not going to change anything, and I'm going to get in trouble, right? But the other two quadrants are interesting, which is it might feel psychologically safe, but it isn't worth it. This is where you speak up. It feels safe, but nothing changes after repeated attempts. And it's like, all right, I'm gonna give up. I'm gonna have someone, make their bed and sleep in it too, because my insistent and consistent efforts to speak up are futile. The other one is it doesn't feel safe, but it feels worth it. This is where Ed Pearson found himself at Boeing, where he didn't feel safe to speak up, but his courage and integrity kicked in because he saw that the practices weren't safe and weren't effective in building a commercial aircraft.
Which is a problem because people fly in it all the time.
Yeah, yeah, they do. And they should work well and not have secrets within them.
Please, yes, no
Yeah.
secrets in my airplane. Um, but I think that kind of leads into, and we're going to talk about this a little bit. And thanks for spinning it right into what I was going to talk about next. Was this idea of people, purpose, and profit? And you put it in that order: people,
Hmm.
purpose, profit. And
Yes.
you have a little section here. I'm going to read this section. Make no mistake, I believe in capitalism. I simply believe in a better version of it. When we put people first, we must live our purpose from the inside out of our organization. And profit, prioritize third rather than first or second, means that it exists as lifeblood to support the people and advance the business's purpose. So I might just stole your thunder, but tell me a little bit about this people, purpose, profit thing and why we should organize it that way.
Yeah, I mean, I could enter into an interesting debate of what comes first, purpose or people. I think they're inherently intertwined. I've seen though that sometimes we can have organizations that are mission or cause driven, but they treat their people inappropriately, which means they aren't really living their purpose. So I'm often asked, what's something I learned from being on Simon Sinek's team? And one of the biggest things is that you have to live what you preach from the inside out. If you preach it and don't live it, are you really doing it? That's where I would argue it's likely unethical. And so I put people first, then purpose, and then profit as an extra reminder that we have to live what we stand for from a purpose, belief, value based from the inside out. The other thing that I'm a real big believer of is we say people first, but like, who are our people? Because sometimes you can have employees who actually, or team members who behave outside the value set. You have to have an intervention there and say, hey, this isn't how we behave. Let's have coaching, let's have feedback. You can also have clients or customers who behave outside of the value set. Are they your people, right? And are you willing to say either you behave in these ways that are documented and are values, or you don't have to be here. You can go somewhere else, both customers as well as team members.
I know some people though that will argue and they'll say, well, if I don't have any profit, then the people aren't going to have a job and we're not going to matter. The purpose of the company is not going to matter, right? If we don't have any profit. So that's why we put such a big emphasis on that. And reading Simon's book, The Infinite Game, I always talk about that point. It's like, well, what game are you playing right now then? Like, are you playing this finite game or are you playing the infinite game? And what is the consequence of that game that you're playing? So talk to me about what you would say in correspondence to that person that's like, hey, we live and die by the quarter. Our financial numbers are what they are. We've got to make quota. We got to hit those KPIs, profit, profit, profit. The people will, you know what? You don't like it. See ya, kind of thing.
Well, so you're speaking really well and inviting in some of the concepts from Simon's book and game theory and game theory concepts. So one, that mindset is a short-term mindset. You might do well in the short term, but it's at the cost and the sacrifice of existing long term. And one of the points that Simon really eloquently makes in The Infinite Game is that there are two currencies in the infinite game, right? These games that may have mile markers but no endpoint. There's no winner of business. There's no winner of life. There's no winner of relationships. And the currencies of those infinite games are resources. Yes, you need to have enough resources to get by, and the will of the people. And when you make decisions where you not only do well, but you do the right thing, you can actually increase the will of the people. And having folks feel connected to purpose or a cause and feel that that purpose or cause they can both contribute to, and they feel as though they're a part of it. It's done for them too, as well as be part of high trusting, high performing teams. The will of the people goes up. And what's interesting is that when you have will, you can actually outperform better resource counterparts. And we've seen this time and time again, both in business as well in politics, geopolitics. I mean, you look at what's happening in the Ukraine right now. Russia has been hugely over-resourced, but Ukraine is fighting for their right to exist, right? And so there's been amazing will, even though they are arguably under-resourced.
You go on to talk about leadership and this idea of what leadership is, and something you said you made a mistake early on in your career, and this actually got me thinking a lot because I haven't really ever asked this question, and I just go on assuming that I know what leadership is, or that everybody just knows what leadership is. So I don't really ask them what they think leadership is. And then I don't know how to coach them or how to inspire them or how to help them in what they're trying to do. We're a little bit misaligned probably because we don't totally understand or aren't clear on that definition. Tell me how that question I'm curious what people have said in response to that question. What do people define as leadership?
Well, so, I mean, look no further to the number of terms we use for leadership, right? There's servant leadership and courageous leadership and bold leadership and human leadership. I wasn't aware we were leading anything other than human beings.
Yeah.
And there's visionary leadership. Like there's all these different approaches. I kind of want to see, can we, though I think it behooves certain communities or organizations to define what leadership looks like in their context, really shouldn't be all that different. And so when I look at what is leadership, I think there's like a stew of human attributes, right? So all leaders care. They care for people. They care for their values. They care for their purpose. All leaders exude and do the work to exude empathy and compassion. Leaders are authentic, which means you know who they are based on their behavior, and they consistently are who they are. One of the myths with leadership is that leaders are charismatic and warm and extroverted. BS. BS. My best leader ever was consistently cold and grumpy. She had a good sense of humor, but like she was salty, she was hard. But that was authentically who she was. If she tried to be warm and charismatic all the time, she would burn out. She'd be exhausted. But that was who she was authentically, mixed with care. She had my back. She showed up to help me grow. I never had that that doubt ever. But she wasn't authentically warm or charismatic. She was authentically cold and grumpy. I think all leaders serve. So the fact that we have this term servant leadership to me means that our modern definition and practice of leadership is broken because, like, hard stop, if you aren't serving people and a cause bigger than yourself, you aren't leading. That's you're likely to have selfish, self-interest rather than a service orientation. Leaders are decisive. Leaders take accountability. When things go wrong, they take disproportionate responsibility. When things go right, they give disproportionate credit. All leaders, I think, have humility, a real honest look at where are they strong and where could they get better. Leaders display courage. Leaders display vulnerability. Like, to me, leadership is a set of behaviors not done in a uniform way, done in a dynamic and an authentic way to oneself. But like, to me, that's the stew. It's like the attribute stew of how a leader shows up and behaves.
How often do you meet those people?
Um, Not as often as I'd like. Um, Not as often as I'd like, which gives us good job security, Scott.
Yeah, I was about to say.
Yeah, I mean,
I told my wife, she was a dental hygienist, and she gets mad when people don't floss their teeth. She's like, I can't believe. I was like, if they floss their teeth all the time, you wouldn't have a job. So
yeah. Well, maybe not. She would have less of a job, perhaps, but stuff still happens. But yeah, I mean, I mean, a couple of things. One, those who are in positions of authority who don't prescribe to the way that I'm defining leadership, they tend to be allergic to me anyway. So maybe they'll challenge me a little bit. Maybe I'll engage with them a bit, but they tend to leave the room or shut down. I am fortunate that a lot of the leaders, I sort of hang out with, I would say, two camps of leaders. One is a set of leaders who get it and they're students of leadership and they're humble and they're wonderful and they don't think they're amazing leaders, which makes them amazing leaders. And then there's another camp of folks who think they're better than they are and care about this stuff, but lack a little bit of self-awareness, and lack a little bit of humility and vulnerability to actually go check out how they're doing with the people that matter most, who are the people that they're leading. And so I'm always weary of folks, whether they're in formal roles of leadership or just are fans of leadership. I'm always weary when they say, "Oh, I love this stuff. It's really important to me. I'm a great leader." Anytime someone says, "I'm a great leader, I'm a great parent, I'm such a good listener, I'm such a great friend," like, feel free to take a couple steps back because we don't get to decide these things, right? It's far more meaningful if someone else describes us that way. There are few things in life that are far more meaningless if we claim them and far more meaningful if others bestow them upon us.
well said. Can you give me an example of, so these types of leaders create cultures, these speak up cultures that we're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Can you give me an example? I want to hear like the opposite. Can you give me an example of leaders that aren't this way, that don't create cultures, speak up cultures, and what the impact has been versus speak up cultures, healthy speak up cultures that create a positive impact?
Yeah. So first and foremost, I mean, definitions are in order. What is a speak up culture? So and we've talked a bit about it with the 2x2. Is it safe? Is it worth it? The way I define a speak up culture is it's an environment in which folks feel that it's both safe and worth it to speak up and share ideas, even if they're half baked, feedback to help one another grow, share concerns, smoke before it becomes fire, disagree, admit mistake. I think one of my favorite examples of the contrast between a team and an organization that didn't have a speak up culture to one that did is the transformation of Ford Motor Company under Alan Mulally. And it's a well-documented story. I'm not the only one who's shared this story, but from the lens of culture and a speak up culture, it's so powerful. So the previous leader before Mulally was part of the Ford family and had a bit of a tyrannic reputation. The company was performing really poorly. The quality of their products, sales, like they were teetering toward bankruptcy. Um, and that leader cultivated the type of culture that if you spoke up with bad news, all of a sudden you were the problem and you just weren't at the next team meeting. And this is at like the highest level of the organization, kind of like being at a boardroom table with Dr. Evil. Like if you said the wrong thing, a red button would be pushed. You'd be, dropped into the depths of Mordor. I'm now thinking of Will Ferrell and his characterization of the character Mustafa in Austin Powers. But that's kind of what it was like. So you conditioned the highest level of leaders on this executive team, just zip it. It's better for all of us and you to practice a culture of silence as opposed to a true speak up culture. Mulally comes in. He actually came from Boeing commercial back when it was a little bit healthier. And he comes in his opening press conference, he's asked what type of car he drives, and he says a Lexus because it's the best car on the road, as if to create a rallying cry internally to his team, make me a car that I'm proud to actually drive, because the Ford Taurus or Fusion or whatever they were making at the time wasn't doing it for him. And he did what any of us would do. He would have executive team meetings. They would do green, yellow, red project status. And though the balance sheet was awful and unhealthy, everyone was just reporting everything's hunky dory. Everything's good, boss. No issues here. And after a few weeks of this charade, he said, either your people are lying to you, you're lying to yourselves, or you're lying to me. We need to, quote, embrace more truth telling in this organization if we're going to actually right this ship. What's going on? And this guy, Mark Fields, who ended up becoming Mullally's successor, raises his hand and says, I got an issue. And Mulally literally stood up, gave him a standing ovation. Thank you, Mark. Who can help Mark? Someone else raised their hand. I can help you with that. And a new precedent was set, right? This is how we behave. They weren't punished. And in fact, instead of Mark being dismissed, he was promoted informally. His chair was moved to sit next to Mulally at the next team meeting. So that's how you go from discouraging and punishing folks from speaking up to encouraging and rewarding folks for speaking up, especially with bad news or hard things to hear.
So that's an important part that you just mentioned. That was the reward of the behavior, because we as human beings, we continue to do things that we feel rewarded by doing, right? So whether it's a monetary reward or an emotional reward or a relational reward or whatever, we recognize that, oh, that was a good thing I just did because good things happen as a result. Bad things happen as a result of that. I'm not going to do that anymore.
Totally.
So reinforcing the behavior through reward or encouragement. Talk about that for a second, because you hit that on that in the book. You said encouraging and rewarding people for speaking up are the key.
Yes.
How how do we do that in different environments? Is it, oh, I give you, an Amazon gift card every time you bring an idea to the table? Or is it, I bring your chair closer to mine at the next board meeting? Like, I don't know. What is it?
So there's a brilliant book on the effective uses of intrinsic and extrinsic rewards and motivation called Prime to Perform by Lindsay McGregor and Neil Doshi. So extrinsic rewards like money works with simple tasks, right? Put more shoes in box. If you put more shoes in box and maintain quality, I'll give you more money. That works. But when it comes to this stuff, intrinsic rewards, play, purpose, potential, acknowledgement, these tend to be more powerful. So the encourage and reward cycle as it relates to a speak up culture, encourage means people are led to believe that them speaking up is worth it. It's safe enough and worth it. But when they do speak up and share an idea, feedback, concern, disagreement, and a mistake, are they actually rewarded? I more so mean so extrinsic rewards like pay raise, bonus, promotion, those will happen in time, but the immediate reward is more intrinsic. Thank you, Scott. That must have taken courage. I don't yet completely see what you're pointing out. Can you share how you got to that conclusion? I just challenged you and rewarded you at the same time, giving you more airtime. We didn't implement these ideas from the team. Great ideas, though. Keep them coming. Here's why we didn't implement these ideas. By the way, who has ideas of how we can overcome these obstacles? That's still rewarding people and sharing that you're submitting ideas, you're speaking up, it's still being heard and being considered. So it's those two things, encourage and reward. My favorite example of encourage comes from Ben Berman, who's a retired pilot and an aviation expert. He worked, I think, almost 24 years as a pilot with United. And by the end of his career, he had 4 stripes on his arm. He was the most senior pilot. And he would say to his flight crew every single time, I've never flown a perfect flight, and today is no exception. I need to know what you see. That's the encourage piece. But if someone then chimes in and speaks up and says, we haven't de-iced, and I see ice on the wing, if the captain goes, shut up, that's not going to work. You've done encourage, but not the reward, right? The reward piece is thank you. You're right. Let's do it. Sheesh. Like, what would I do without you? Appreciate it.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of the my door's always open type leaders,
Passive. Yeah.
passive leadership, accidental type leader, reactive leadership. But then when people actually do walk in the door, they say, "No, I'm too busy right now,"
Yeah.
or no, 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 we're not doing that right now, or whatever. And then you're again teaching that, you know, I don't value that really. I said I did, but my actions are saying that, right? It's the whole walk the talk thing that we talk about often. But I just want us to be aware as leaders, like what message are we portraying? What brand are we portraying, or what are we building? Right? What's the
Yeah.
reputation we're building out into the world? The brand reputation of I am the type of leader who does this. I'm the type of leader who says that.
Yeah. Well, so my door is always open. I mean, it shouldn't be because sometimes your door should be closed for certain meetings or to get work done. As well for folks who don't work in a traditional office or for folks who work in a remote or a hybrid setting, where did all the office doors go anyway, right? So my door is always open is passive and it's actually inappropriate because there should be boundaries of time when your door isn't open. I think it's better to close the door, to open the door when you do invite informal conversation, and then to actively go out of your office and roam the halls, whether virtually or physically, and check in on people. I just heard a great story yesterday I was speaking at a hospital association conference, and someone said every week our CEO, I think it's every Friday or something, but there's a consistent time, even multiple times a week, to accommodate for folks who are on different shifts, where the hospital CEO just roams the halls, checks in on people. How are you doing? Anything you need. And there's someone who builds a list because they know what's coming and they actually have valuable conversation with the hospital CEO as they roam the halls. And it's appropriate in that setting. It was a smaller rural hospital. Like it made sense. But it was great and it was predictable and it was consistent and it actually went somewhere.
I love that, man. Thank you for challenging the status quo of leadership. I think that when we need people like you and phrases like this to help us think, because I think we get passive in our own things of what we expect leaders to be. And you and people like Simon and other leaders that I've talked to, or thought leaders in the space, thought leader, I just called you a thought leader, you like that, are all about this idea of like, let's challenge that. Let's challenge the thinking on what leadership is and how do we define that, and
Yeah.
what a speak up culture is. I mean, the idea of psychological safety is not a new one.
No.
Um, and your book is all about psychological safety, but I think your approach is what causes us to think, which is super smart, which I'm grateful for.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I mean, I'm not a fan of the term thought leadership. Like I'm leading with my thought right now. You know, if we lead with thought but successfully don't do anything to adopt those thoughts or put them into our actions, that's called hallucination. Like bravo, you're thinking differently, but you're not behaving differently. So we on our team, we like to call it action leadership, which is how can we equip people with thoughts and concepts and ideas, but also practical, applicable things they can try on and do to make an immediate, measurable difference in the effectiveness of their leadership every single day, that don't need to be these huge overhauls, like little things like track the conversations you have that are finished versus complete, right? We all have finished conversations, or we got to rush to the next meeting, or pick up the kids or whatever it might be, and we haven't completed a conversation. I just had one before we hopped on for this podcast. That's why I was a little flustered, because I came off of a finished conversation, but I had another commitment, didn't want to be late, right? And so I said, this is finished. Let's complete on this later today. We have more time. And it sort of suspends it, not the perfect, but it's better than, well, our meeting's done. No, like there's unfinished business. Let's complete on it. So yeah, that's action leadership over thought leadership.
I'll often ask when an event planner is hiring me to speak at an event, I'll always say, do you want application or do you want inspiration? Like where are you on that thing right now? And if you want 100% inspiration, I'm not your guy. Like I am not going to stand up and cause everybody to cry and, hold their hand over their chest and stand and like that's not me. Okay. Because I believe that through application comes the transformation piece. And that's generally what we all seek in life anyway, whether we're leaders or anybody else. I think there's an aspect of that we need to pay attention to. Shed, thanks for being here, man. Thank you for, I knew this was going to be good. I knew that you were going to bring it. If people want to find out more about you, how to get a hold of you, speak at an event, come and do workshops, get copies of your book, whatever, what is it?
All roads lead to shedinspires.com, SHED inspires.com. You can get all the things there. I'm most active on LinkedIn at the moment, and I'm the only, I think, in the entire 8+ billion human race species, I think I'm the only Stephen Shedletzky. So all you handfuls of Shedletskys out there, please be mindful of how you name your children. But if you Google me, you will find me and go to all the right places.
If you can figure out how to spell Shedletzky, then they will
even if you misspell it, Google will probably, did you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because there's only one. Did you mean this one? It's like,
yeah.
I meant that one. So, all right, man. Well, thanks for being on. I really appreciate you.
Thanks, Scott. A joy, and I hope this is valuable for your listeners. A treat to join you.
Culture. Culture is atmosphere. It's that thing that we create. And leaders create culture, sub-leaders create subculture, and it all kind of boils up into this idea of where we exist. Do we create a culture where people can speak up? Do we create a culture where people feel that it's safe and that it's worth it to speak up? And that is where we are going to thrive. Those cultures that don't create that live and die by the immediate task at hand, are the ones that have constant turnover. They're not optimized to their full potential. They're probably not as profitable as they could be. And they have places where people don't want to work. People don't want to stay in it's not worth it anymore to stay in environments like that. We have a job market where there's options, and we have younger generations that have a mentality of there are options. So it's not worth it to stay in this place. I've seen my grandparents or my older parents stay in jobs that they were miserable in because it didn't breed this culture that they wanted to be part of. And now these younger generations aren't going to stand for it. Is it safe? Is it worth it? I love his idea, fearless leader, that embrace your fear. There's podcasts I did years and years ago with talking about fear and how to embrace fear. And actually we're moving through fear. We use fear to help signal certain things. Fear is natural. We should embrace it and look at what it's telling us. Are we aligning the people, the purpose, and the profit? Are we prioritizing them where they should be and what they should be doing? Culture, empathy, care, authentic, service, humility, the qualities of a leader. Go down that list when he mentions those words and check yourself. Checkbox under the yes column or the no column for each one of those words, and see where you think you could increase your leadership capacity and the ability for people to want to follow you, not have to follow you. If you want to find out more information about me or check out the show notes where there's going to be more information and links to the things referenced in this episode, visit skotwaldron.com. And lastly, I'm asking for a little bit of love, just a little bit. So please take a moment, follow, rate the show. The algorithms like that. It helps me get the word out. I really appreciate it. Thank you. And until next time, stay unlocked.